Guys, really excited to introduce our next guest here. It's Shooter Hunt, the Vice President of Scouting at Prep Baseball. Been with the company now for over a handful of years and has really kind of set the stage for what we do nationally. Takes the lead on all of our big events, the All American game, which has just been taken off the last couple of years, most recently in Miami, to then what we have coming up here, the Super 60, the biggest event of the winter, coming back to the Max in McCook. And Shooter, first off, welcome on. I know you're a busy guy, and for you to grace us with your presence is really appreciated. And can't wait to talk a little bit about some of these upcoming events and maybe some other things going on.
Drew, I was ecstatic when you guys offered me the opportunity to come on because I've been telling you for so long how big a fan I am of the show and what you guys do, the way you clip it, the way it's always perpetually in my face from social media, and I'm locked in. Obviously, trying to get as much information as I can on the players, but you guys do a great job, so thanks for having me.
Well, thanks, Shooter. And a ton of that credit goes to this man right here, Gavin Smith. So pat
Gabo.
yourself on the back. Gavin has really taken the lead on this whole podcast thing, and from formatting it the way that we have to the presentation, like you're talking about, and the clipping. And I know it's not an easy task. So big kudos and shout out to Gavin Smith. But Shooter, getting into this here, we do have Tyler Defaball and we've got Peter Hammett on, Gavin Smith. I want to make it some sort of a round table at some point, but huge event coming in less than a month now. I know from your entire, once the All American game ends in the fall, I feel like a lot of your attention moves to this Super 60, getting the right players in this event. Last year, I thought it was as deep of an event as we have had. Especially when you look at some of the drafts, some of the money getting thrown around to those
Mhm.
Super 60 guys. So, what was your take on last year, and what can we expect for this year?
Well, even last year, you could have thrown Wolkow, right? He classed up the year before. He would have been there as well. So that would have been a bunch. But obviously, last year was outstanding. 19 players drafted. I believe it was 19, 7 or 15 that signed, or 17, whatever it was. $17.5 million signing bonuses. That's without Tyler Bell saying, "Hey, you're not paying me my money. I'm going to school. I'm going to be a top 10 pick." As you guys know full well, Kentucky's getting ready for his freshman year, along with Chris Lavonis, who turned down a considerable sum to head to Wake Forest. But each year it's just gotten so much bigger, right? And Drew, you've been on with Prep Baseball. You guys are just kind of a little bit younger than Drew and I right now, but like from the start of things where people are asking, what is this event? What's going on? More nationally outside the Midwest to, hey, this is a marquee event. This is how I kick off my draft season going into the spring. Each time we bring the players in, I'm always, hey, this is not going to make or break you. This is all these people are here. They want to get their eyes on you, see what the progressions have been, what your development has been, where you are on that developmental curve, and kind of figure out where do I need to go watch this spring. Because as we talk about all the time, like getting those eyes on you and getting on that travel schedule for decision makers is ultra important. And I mean, especially the last few years, you have guys like Blake Walters, who was an absolute stud, just kind of blew up at the Super 60. This past year, guys like Cash Mayfield from Oklahoma was kind of banged up throughout the summer, didn't have his chance to shine on that national circuit. He's healthy, comes to the Super 60, explodes there, along with obviously a host of other guys. But it's continued to get bigger and bigger. And you talked about the All American game. Coming out of that, one of the, I don't even want to call it anxiety, but like I was a little bit nervous about, hey, the Super 60, I think we may have some guys who want to come that normally in the past may not have. And we do have a fair amount of Georgia kids and Florida kids, which in the past have not been quite um, as, no, I don't want to say willing, but like their season's starting, right? So like they've just kind of pushed it aside, whereas now they're focusing like, hey, I got to get to the Super 60. But
Well,
through it all, the big thing for me, which is why I've been calling you and texting you nonstop, is the Midwest really drives it, right? It started there. Got to have the best talent in the Midwest at all times, and that's something that I key in on.
and you bring up a great point there, Shooter, because it's a good problem to have that these Florida guys, Georgia guys, Texas guys, these guys whose seasons are starting, they are probably outside already. The fact that they want to drive up to Chicago, go to an indoor event, I think speaks to just how good of an event it is and how many decision makers are at that. And I think the proof is in the pudding when you look back at the last few years. And with that, it does create quite a dynamic here in the Midwest because the whole event used to be filled with Illinois, Wisconsin, Indiana, Ohio. And it's not that way anymore. And, from an Illinois perspective, it's in our state. Um, I wish we could get 50 guys there. Illinois
Yeah.
is such a deep state with talent. I really do, and that's how it used to be, but that's not the case anymore. So it has become hyper, I guess, aggressive to get in there, or just extremely tough to get in there. And with that, looking at the roster this year, we've had 4 Illinois players that are in the Super 60. Four extremely high level guys that we're really, excited about. But this has started to happen the last few years, Shooter, where it's been harder and harder to get invites to the Illinois guys, the Wisconsin guys. So with that, it has just kind of spurred the reason to have a pro case.
Hmm.
There are, I mean, last year there were 10 drafts in Illinois out of high school. I think it led the country
It
as
did.
far as, yeah, states that had drafts. So, we know there are so many guys in Illinois that need to be followed, that at least need to be getting in front of these area guys. And that is why we run the pro case. That's why I'm so excited about it. We've got a bunch of left-handed bats, and we'll get to that. We'll touch on some of those guys. But some of these guys that are coming to the Super 60, I want to lead it off here with Connor Essenberg, Lincoln Way West, a Kentucky commit, left-handed pitcher, also first base, right field, can really defend. I think that's one of his most unsung attributes. Something that gets overlooked maybe the most is how good he is over around the bag at first base or even in
Mm.
right field. And then he is kind of a unique profile because he's got that right-handed swing, but he's a left-handed thrower. And right now, I like him both, Shooter, but left-handed on the mound, he's hyper competitive, and it's a low to mid 90s fastball. He's got 3 pitches. He also has juice at the plate, so I'm excited about him. And then the other guys we have coming: Ethan Moore, shortstop, Oak Park River Forest, going to Tennessee. Quinn Shambo, one of the best defensive catchers, in the Midwest, maybe the country, a Libertyville product, who's also a high-level QB1 for
Oh, I
Libertyville
didn't
and
know
put
that.
up crazy numbers this past fall. Oklahoma State commit, and then Brandon Shannon out of McHenry, a Louisville commit. You mentioned Blake Walters and how he kind of, made a name for himself a couple years ago at the Super 60. I am extremely excited for Brandon Shannon, and as I know you are as well, as being one of those breakout candidates this year. So, any guys you want to follow up on from Illinois that I mentioned or from surrounding areas, feel
Well,
free.
I think you touched on the difficulty in putting the roster together, right? Like Illinois could carry this thing on its own. And yearly, why we talk so much is because like I don't want to miss on these guys. If they deserve the opportunity to be there, we want them there, right? This is in your backyard. This is an event guys who have had circled for years. It's why I press you guys for so much information on these guys nonstop. And we have had guys come out of the pro case the week before. Hey, this dude needs to be in front of these guys at the Super 60, and it has happened. But Essenberg at the top, and you guys would tell me if I'm wrong, but what I saw throughout the summer, and we followed him in the past, and we all the 2As are always difficult, right? What is he going to be better at? Put him out there. He's going to be good at something because the moniker that I put in my notes, like this guy's not scared. He goes out there, he expects success. He does not care what the other team's talking. He does not care about the fans. He's there to put on a show and to dominate. Whether it's at the plate, where he gets off some big hacks from the right side, like you talked about, or on the mound. It's not the whippiest arm, so it's not super elastic, but it's in the zone, 3 pitches, fearless in the zone. He's not afraid of contact, but he's going to miss some bats. And I never want to impart it onto a kid like you can't hit or you're not going to pitch, you're not going to do this, dude. Do it all until somebody tells you that you can't. And right now, I expect him to come around. I'm pumped that he's going to be able to play first base because he'll make the rest of the shortstops look good. So I'm sure Ethan Moore will be pumped up about that. But tell me if I'm wrong. Like that's what I've seen from Essenberg in the past, and that's why we have those combos about him. He's a dude who has some moxie to him.
Absolutely, you're spot on. I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. I really don't know what he's going to be best at long term. When you see a left-handed arm, it's hard not to kind of
Mhm.
lean that way versus a right-handed bat. But I've seen him take a lot of good at bats against some good arms, and he's the type of guy you love him when he's on your team, and you probably can't stand him when he's not on your team when you're having to face off against him. But he impacts the game in a number of ways, and I was just talking to his head coach this past weekend. Expecting big things out of him his senior season, and that team as well, Lincoln Way West. They're going to be one to watch because they've got Essenberg. They also have Michael Pettit, who was at the Future Games
Okay.
this past summer, committed to Notre Dame. They've got Lucas Acevedo, a shortstop, also pitcher, going to UIC, and they've got depth there as well. So
So
not to
he's
get
at
on the high
West.
school. What's that?
He's at Lincoln Way West.
Lincoln Way.
'Cause-
I mean, the Lincoln Ways are loaded shooters.
Well,
So
I
you
was
got
looking
Lincoln Way
at.
East with Bauer.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I was looking at West versus East. I think I called you and said, "Hey, is that a rivalry?" Like me being the idiot out of towner. Like, is that a rivalry? Yeah, there's gonna be some people there, just a couple.
Well, and it's hard too because you got East, you got West, but then there's Lincoln Way Central, and they're no slouch as well. Like you cannot sleep on Lincoln Way Central. They've got
Okay.
Menzick, who I know
Oh,
is an
okay.
arm that we've talked
He's
about
another
can
guy we've been
really
talking
spin
about.
it.
Yep.
Yeah, and like he competes and he's in the zone and he comes from bloodlines. His older brothers at Xavier. They've got Liam Arsich, who will be a pro case attendee.
Oh man.
Tyler Defaball, you saw them a couple times last year. I know I'm missing some players over there. They had Colin Mowry last year. Um, but the Lincoln Ways are loaded shooter. Just if you drive through Illinois and you stay on that I-80 highway south of
Okay.
Chicago, you're gonna hit the Lincoln Ways. You're gonna be right next to Homewood Flossmoor. You're gonna go across through like Providence Catholic, Joliet Catholic, all the playing fields. You're close to Marist. You're close to the Chicago Catholic League Blue. Gosh, I know Lions. I mean, there's so many good schools and players down in that area, as there are across Illinois. But it's a hotbed down there, and we do spend a decent amount of time floating around that highway.
You know what? I was just talking to an SEC recruiter about some guys, just the importance of players being able to step in and play right away, right? It's difficult as a freshman to do that, but we were talking about Illinois high school baseball. It's like those are guys who are coming from really good leagues, good baseball. They have a chance to play as freshmen. And you've seen it all around the country, not to like get too far in the past, but like guys like Brendan Summerhill, who's going to have a huge year at Arizona, but like he leaves high school, you don't have to worry about him. He's going to be okay. Plays as a freshman, has some lumps, but like gets some experience, and now obviously he's taken off. But that's why you guys know full well, like schools all around the country are coming into Illinois to try to grab guys, and it's all pockets of the state, right? I'm trying to plan my travel schedule to go down south. Again, I'm going to look like such
Yeah,
an
good
idiot here.
luck.
I'm
Yeah,
looking at
no, good luck. Yeah.
I was looking at Springfield, Missouri, not Springfield, Illinois. Like, and I'm looking at the map. Like, I gotta drive north, and then actually Kevin Mulder is like, What are you doing, dude? You're in the wrong state here." Um, but anyway, Essenberg, like, I can't say enough about him, and even Shambo. I had no idea he was a quarterback.
Oh, and it's real shooter. If you want to look up some highlights, he had I think maybe the top numbers in the state. It was 46 touchdowns to 5 interceptions and 4,000 plus yards. I mean, I'm throwing out some stats
Gee,
right now, and football's not my expertise, but I think I'm somewhat close on those numbers. And Libertyville was really, really solid. They had some receivers there too. They were an interesting football program. Um, he's one of those. I was talking to his coach this past weekend at the convention, just like comes in, doesn't necessarily need to be a master of the playbook, and he's just going to go ball out. And he's just that way. And he's got some of the best arm talent around that I've seen come through in a while because the way it works behind the plate, I mean, it explodes out of the crouch. And then he actually threw an inning at the future games, and he was one of the best arms on Team Illinois. So if it ever doesn't work out behind the plate as a quarterback, like he could always get on the mound, and people would be interested.
it's each year you go back to the future games because I remember really liking them and. Coaches at the future games, right? They're walking around. There's a certain point during that week where it's like whether it's the second or third day, where they'll come up to me and they'll have specific positions. Hey, are there any shortstops here? Are there any guys? And I remember them being like, are there any catchers? Who's the defensive? And I was like, I don't really know, but like Illinois got this guy that I've been kind of keyed in on throughout the week because I like as a former pitcher, I love watching catchers, like especially how they receive. I Blind squirrel finds a nut, so Shambo, good defender. Goes into this summer. I can remember the middle of the summer calling you, Drew, and being like, I think he's the best defensive catcher in the class. and it was that good. But his arm was a weapon. Like the catch and throw is an actual weapon. It will shut down a running game, and especially the high school level, that's going to be huge. His coach is probably ecstatic. Like, we don't need to pick. We're all set. Like, we dare you to run on us at all times because he's going to shut it down. But can hit for power, which especially the catcher position right now, like that's such a premium. And I was just on a podcast yesterday talking about the Super 60 in general with regards to catching, and high school catching is it's just devalued. It's not a huge market for that, for many reasons, and even looking at our rankings, it's a reason why there's not many catchers in the top 100. So any catcher that is in the top 100, top 150, like that's a huge deal. Like that means the world. But what we have seen from the Super 60, those guys who go off to college, there's a chance there are some huge dudes. You look at Henry Davis, 1-1. Luke Stevenson from a couple years ago has a chance to be a top 10 pick at UNC this year. Historically, year in, year out, those catchers may not be eyeing them for this year, but you better be aware in 3 years because those are going to be dudes. And
Well, and a
Shambo
guy,
can't be that guy.
I mean, a guy from Illinois, just that I want to shout out on exactly what you're talking about because I think he has a huge future. I don't know if it's, top 10 first round pick, but Jimmy Janicki,
Oh, man, your
Jimmy
guy.
Janicki down in Troy. He was one that was at the Super 60. I heard he turned down, he had a number going into the draft and turned down some offers. But I expect him to do big things, and he's kind of slotted in there to be a middle of the order type of bat as a freshman,
Well,
and
it's you know
versatile
what, Drew.
enough to play multiple positions.
I got to give you your flowers here, your credit, because we have awesome combos. And for those listening, like the amount of talks that we have collectively behind the scenes about prospects, putting lists together, getting things out. Drew was pressed very hard on multiple occasions with Jimmy Janicki, and he held his ground. Great evaluation. You trusted your stuff. You have great eyes, and it will come to fruition, God willing. Can't wait to watch him this spring for the
Yeah,
25th ranked Troy Trojans down there,
how
D1
about that?
baseball.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they
Give
got
him
a big
some
fan
love.
in Aaron Fitt right now.
All right, well, good. We just had Skylar on a month or two ago
I
talking
had
a
him on
little
last
bit,
week.
and yeah, no, and you mentioned, evaluating Janicki. He went to Downers Grove North. Like we were lucky enough to get so many at bats on those guys. Jude Warwick, George Wolkow, Ian Check, who went to Texas. I think now he's at Wabash
Was
Valley.
Priester Downing's? Where was Priester at?
Priester was Cary Grove.
Cary Grove. Okay.
Yeah, so that's up in that Libertyville. I mean, Cary Grove's northwest burbs. Libertyville's more north burbs. But you talk about Shambo and Libertyville. They've got some other pieces over there
Hmm.
as well. So, I mean, we could talk on and on. And you mentioned Essenberg, kind of having that moxie, having that competitiveness. A guy that's coming to the Super 60 who's kind of built out of a little bit different cloth. He's more of that like low pulse. I can never tell if it's a good day, bad day. Is that Ethan Moore? Just kind of steady Eddie, goes about his business, but apparently had a huge area code. I know you were getting great reports on him there. He's coming. He's one we're excited about, a switch hitting shortstop that can do a lot of things.
Especially going into this event. For me, like know all these guys intimately, right? Like I know exactly for 4 years we've been following these guys. They're all big draft prospects. So what are you looking for coming into a pro style workout? I think that kid, Ethan Moore, has a chance to really blow up at this and set the foundation this summer, got on all these radars. All of a sudden, guys are going to see what he's done in the offseason, and this is kind of his chance to shine in his backyard. I'm really excited for him to kind of put on a show, especially with what we do with the defensive stuff. We're flowing around kind of the new things that we're doing, which is a lot of fun. Obviously, the hitting, good athlete, but it's important to be good at the right time, right? I always think of luck is when opportunity meets preparation. He's kind of had those situations, and I can't wait for for Ethan Moore to have the opportunity to be in the big stage and really kick off his spring in the right way.
Yeah, no, he's one we're excited about, and kind of just to see how he trends from a pro prospect status and what kind of attention he's getting this spring. Because talking to his high school coach, I know a lot of people have been in there inquiring. Um, but sure, with you being the national, VP of scouting, I think you have one of, if not the hardest jobs in the country with doing the national rankings. You are dealing with 50, however many different state directors we have, different
Mhm.
personalities, different sweet tooths that they have from a prospect status, how they organize their list. And what I love about the dynamic we have is we have our boots on the ground with Tyler Deffelball, Gavin Smith, Peter Hammock, Kevin Cronin, Josh Fields, Andy Sorga, all these guys that are going out to games. We're putting our list together, but then you're cross-checking that list. You're cross-checking me. You bring up Janicki, like you're asking questions like, "Hey, are you sure this guy needs to be here?" And it sharpens us, I feel like, at the top of those classes to make sure we really are asking ourselves the right questions to is this guy really a starter versus a reliever? Is the left-handed bat, more prolific than the right-handed bat? Whatever it may be. But then you're having to organize those by state and fit these guys into, a national list. So I know that's probably a long conversation, but if you want to just get into any of that for the viewers, I'm sure there's people out there that would appreciate it.
For sure, and I mean, I'm only as strong as all of you guys. Like we have so many boots on the ground staff that are really good scouts that I just reap the benefit of being the mouthpiece for you guys at times. So thank you for that. But I do think there's just kind of a base level of putting that stuff together, right? The big four: Georgia, California, Texas, Florida. Kind of starting there. Carolina's really good. But for me, Illinois is also a huge factor. So there's certain points where you guys are like, "Oh, we're okay," and I come in and say, "Hey, no, you're really good." Like we don't have enough players on here, and even the Super 60 right now. You talked about having four guys, and there's a few more that are all Americans, right? So Fowlsky, Jack Bauer in the past, guys who
Yes.
won't be able to make it to the Super 60 this year. So like that extends it, but it gives me that like, hey, we don't have enough because there's kind of a quota of Illinois kids. Historically, if you look, that you guys are making it to the big leagues, you're getting drafted, having those guys from the Midwest, and each state has that pocket. Yes, there'll be random years where there's a first rounder from Wyoming, wherever it may be outside of there. But historically, track record wise, you're kind of looking to specific states and areas. Hey, there's a ton of talent here, right? That Illinois, Missouri, there's a ton of guys there, whether it's in Southern Illinois, the St. Louis area, or getting up into the Chicagoland area. Those are things that I'm constantly looking at. But then from there, hey, starting pitching's a premium, right? It's not just how hard you're throwing. A lot of guys early on, hey, is it projectable? He's hitting 92. Well, like, what is he going to be? It's a max effort 92. That's a bullpen arm. There's not much value in that, even to the collegiate level. Hey, this guy, no, it's super loose. He's 86 to 88 right now. Those are some of the talks we usually have internally. I like to think he's 6'3". He's only 86, 88. Hey, what if he was 92, 93? Would you like him more? Because like the velo will come over time. Eat some cheeseburgers, get stronger, add some weight. Mass equals gas. That's easy. Does he spin it well? What is his manipulation? Does he have that moxie? Thinking of Essenberg, like can he move the ship the pitches around? Can he seam shift? Whatever it may be from that standpoint in the mound. Does he hit? I think of Jaden Fowlsky, another guy, where this dude just hits. His decision-making ability. He's a cold weather kid. He can change planes. He can drive to all fields. He comes to the All-American game. The power's there. There are so many things that he's capable of doing. And even talking to pro guys, it's, hey, where is this guy going to play? Does it matter? If the bat's going to play, that's what the word's going to be carried by. Like, if he can hit, that's something that not many people can do. And for a cold weather kid coming out of Illinois especially, hey, this guy steps into the national circuit and he rakes from day one. That's not easy to do. It's not easy to go down to Lake Point for MPI after having 3 weeks off, after playing JV, whatever it may have been, and all of a sudden you're facing 89 to 92 with a slider and you're still getting hits. That screams like, hey, this is different. He's on time. He sees it well. There's a different level. So that's kind of stuff that I'm always looking for when I'm traveling the country. And I think one of the things you were talking about, all of our state directors, Drew, you're a modest guy, right? Hey, we're good. Illinois, like you usually do a great job of being modest without overselling your guys. And especially last spring, it went down to Southern California, right? There's all these prospects, all these guys. And I left Southern California saying like, hey, there's like 5 arms in Illinois better than anybody here. And like that's something where you guys probably are not thinking that, oh, these guys in LA, Orange County, like they're the top dudes, San Diego. And I was like, no, I'm telling you, like, hey, all your guys are better than these. Like, and it's a no brainer. The reason why I go to the Northeast, I'm planning my Midwest trip right now, the Pacific Northwest. Cold weather arms have been attacked. Like guys want that because they know the upside's there. They're a little bit fresher. And Drew, this is a long-winded answer because there's
Well,
so
I
many
love it.
things going
Yeah.
on in my head when comparing those guys, and even to the ranking standpoint to help out when looking at that. A lot of it's grouping, right? So it's not 80 versus 84. It's more 80 to 120. Hey, these guys are in a group. Oh, this guy should be higher. Well, he's in a great spot. Hey, those top 75 guys, hey, you're looking at potential top two rounders. Over time, for a particular class, this 25 class will have 60 plus top two rounders. Whether it's this year or in 3 years out of college, you start looking at there's going to be 30 first rounders. And we will miss on some of those guys. And it's a huge reason coming out of Illinois where you start looking in the 4 to 500 nationally, there's probably 6 or 7 Illinois guys there. And you want to know why they're there? Because we expect Illinois guys to do well. Whether it's in this year's draft or in the future, that's what we're eyeing. We know it's going to happen. They go off to school, Jimmy Janicki, and they get really good all of a sudden. Like it's not even all of a sudden, but you guys are
Yeah.
locked in on it. But those are the things we're considering. And I always think anywhere in the top 500, you are one of the, we think, a top 500 prospect in the country. Oh my gosh, that's incredible. So that's a long-winded answer of all the things that I'm looking at.
Well, you got me fired up talking about the arms in Illinois. Now I will say I'm jealous of the actions and shortstops in SoCal. But with that being said, like you've got my, wheels spinning here and just talking about how hard it is to get an invite to the Super 60, the Pro Case, or whatever it may be. We have so many arms here in Illinois looking through our 25 class that could pop. And you could go down the list and the 34th guy ranked,
Oh yeah,
he may end up being the best guy. I'm just looking down at some names here.
like Connor
We
Blue is the guy we've been
y-
locked in on.
yes, that's
Uh,
that's a great call out. Connor
Gerardo,
Blue and
who's
O'Fallon.
the kid going to Alabama? Gerardo.
Joe Chiarotto. You got Joe Chiarotto, who's a low to mid 90s bulldog righty with multiple pitches, two-way guy that's 98 from the outfield, impacts the game with his bat. You've got Austin Muzo at Mascuda, who's one of the
Oh
more
yes, the
polished
future
arms
gamer.
in the
Love
state.
him.
Yes, you've got Luke Menzik, who's one of the more complete arms, strike thrower, one of the best, breaking balls in the class. You got Brandon Menser down there at Cesar Valier going to Cincinnati, who I think has one of the highest upsides in the class. You've got Lucas Grant, a lefty out of Joliet Catholic, who's just a strike thrower going to Purdue that competes in the zone, easy effort. I mean, he could be 90-94 at Purdue and be a high level draft.
Oh yeah.
You've got Andrew Winslow, one of the highest ceilings down there at Triad, going to Oklahoma State. Now, getting into number 20, you've got Joe Olson at St. Lawrence going to Louisville, who's been a 4-year starter at Louisville, who's a Bulldog lefty that's, 90-92. You got Joshua Holst at 23 at Libertyville going to Air Force, who is a future gamer, strike thrower, monster of a, human being, just a workhorse frame, lefty with strikes. Like, Tommy Kramkowski down at Belleville East at 28 going to
God, you guys have the
Missouri
best
State.
names too.
I mean, Shooter, it really is. Like, I love being able to be here in Illinois because there is talent for days and it's all over the state. It's not concentrated in one area. Yes. Is there more population in Chicago? Sure. But there are just as many guys coming out of Springfield, Chatham, the Metro East area, and St. Louis. And then you start talking about that Effingham area, and that's loaded. And then Champaign, and then Bloomington Normal is just rolling out guys left and right. You've got Peoria, you've got the Quad Cities, you've got Rockford. The state's never been better, Shooter. I love talking about it. I get fired up about it, but we should probably move on.
Well, I was just
Yeah.
gonna throw in real quick. It that makes the Super 60 the roster, right? There are other states as well. And I always think about it from my perspective when we're doing like, oh, this guy, we're not inviting him. We really like him. And in my head, I'm like, if that was me, I would tell Shooter Hunt to F off. And like, I would be like, I'm going to prove you wrong. And I can't wait to like stomp on you. So like, hopefully they're doing that. Like, you were wrong. Go, like, it was no malice
That,
against it. But it is like the Illinois, like, it's just a pipeline, which is why like I'm constantly there. And I do want to give a shout, like the facilities, all the cold weather facilities And the guys who are training have done such an awesome job of catching up. And the technology, is, of course, we've shifted to has been a huge factor where like the differential between the Florida kid and the Illinois, it's not that much. A lot of it just has to do with like repetitions. You guys are in spring training mode, they're in mid-season, but like the skill level, oh, on point.
Well, and you mentioned like kind of kids proving you wrong if they don't get an invite.
Yeah.
I try to preach that shooter with the rankings. It's like if you don't like where you're ranked or like prove us wrong. It is a number. Like go shove it in my face. Like, hey, I should have been ranked this high or I am this good. Like go prove it to me.
Yeah.
Because that's what I want to see. I want everybody to reach their max potential. I want everybody to come to an event and show as well as they can, or when we go watch a spring game, show to the best of your ability. Um, but talking about all this talent, in Illinois, I think it leads us to the pro case. We mentioned that this is an event that we started a couple years ago, kind of out of a necessity. Like, man, there are so many good players that are not going to the Super 60 anymore. How can we get them, the attention they deserve? Last year, I thought was the best one we've had. It was the best showing we had from area scouts coming out to watch these guys. And it's one of those, we run it at the end of January because we want to give those guys an opportunity to get to the Super 60 shooter, the Cal Sefcic's of the world, or the Aiden
Hmm.
Hazy, or whatever it may be, the Victor Izquierdo from a few years
Oh,
ago.
Navy.
Yes. So we run it early. Now, with that, some of these arms in Illinois aren't fully ready, and that is okay. Like, if you're not fully ready and you've been invited, don't come. Like, do not, it's not worth it to come. These guys we'll get your name out there. These pro scouts probably know about you as it is, but if you are ready, if you are 100% on January 29th and you've been invited, what a great opportunity to just show kind of the improvements you've made over the winter. Right now, it's trending to be much more of a position player heavy event. We try to keep the numbers low. This should be way more intimate. It shouldn't be some massive event where we're trying to just run guys through. And I think there are some guys that are going to really, really intrigue some people, shooter. Like,
Uh,
yeah, go ahead. We've
I
got
was
some left-handed
data would
bats.
data would suggest that's absolutely going to happen. And you have like some guys that I'm eyeing. Speaking of data, the actual analytics of the athleticism of those guys that are coming are through the roof.
There's some guys that check a lot of boxes. Trey Myers just signed up out of New Trier. He was a future gamer, committed Indiana. He's like a 6'5" runner. It's a 6'4" body, 200 plus pounds. I mean, could not fill out the uniform any better. He's got arm strength. He's got easy whip and bat speed and some juice in the barrel. CJ DeKinga's a great looking prospect
Michigan
out of
State, he was a
Manuka.
future gamer.
Yes, another future game. A lot of these guys are future gamers that um, really deserve this attention and deserve to be seen by these area scouts. Joey Aaron is just an athletic left prospect
That's
going
my
to
guy.
yeah, going to Xavier. Zach Bava isn't that prototypical like oh my gosh pro guy, but if you watch him play, he plays with his hair on fire. He's a unbelievable bat to ball left-handed hitter with juice in the stick. Um, Davis Collie, he's one to maybe take an eye on or check out shooter if you haven't seen him. He hasn't really been a high level national guy, but as far as just pure left handed bats that has a little polish and some juice in the stick, he's one to watch. Jacob Parr has been like double arrows up since the fall. He was on the
Mm.
Cubs scout team. I know Cooper Trinkle got a number of different looks at him, our Indiana scouting director. He goes to Lamont. He was a late commit to Ohio State, but he's kind of cut out of that Trey Myers cloth. Like big physical body. He's a left-handed hitter. He's a sub-7 runner. I really like the upside and the way that's trending there. Brady Shalemoser, like I was just, I don't know, Peter, if you saw that video of him hitting the other day, came out just on social, and I mean, that swing continues to tick up. Not that it had much improvements to really go. It was already really, really good. So, Shooter, I know I'm just like rattling off some guys, but Gavin Triesenberg's a guy I'm really high on. Arizona, brother, Arizona commit, brother Rice, longtime varsity starter. Just he's one of the best baseball players in the class, and also has the body, has the actions, can really defend on the left side of the infield. AJ Putty, big physical right-handed hitter. Chase Peterson was at our senior future games going to Heartland. Jackson Natanic, um, two-way guy going to Illinois State, can really pick it on the infield, but spins it at 3,000 as well, like with the breaking ball. Um, So I don't know. Enzo Infelice, one of the best right-handed bats. He's coming. Man, Drew Church is one of the best shortstop defenders in the state. He's going to Eastern Illinois. I think long story short is like I'm excited. Like it's going to kick off our winter in a great way. There's going to be a ton of talent. These guys will get a great opportunity to showcase their skills in front of these pro scouts and hopefully be seen this spring. Because ultimately, like you go to the Super 60, you're Blake Walters, you set the world on fire. Like you have to then go do it in the spring,
Hmm.
right? And like he then proceeded to touch 99 in the spring. Um, you go to these events to get the attention and then you go earn your money on the field. And that's what I can't wait to see with some of these pro case guys is who draws that attention, who gets those area guys to go watch them, and then who goes and just does it this spring and who balls out.
You're cooking right now,
I,
Drew.
I get
You're
fired up, shooter. I'm sorry. Yeah, you got to
it's
stop me. You got to cut me off over here.
it is it's a really good class. Honestly, it's a really good class in Indiana too, like 25, 30 deep, which is also
Whoa.
between Indiana and Illinois. It's like, oh, all these guys, like it's just going to turn into the Indiana Illinois Super 60. That's what it's felt like at some moments. But like you talked about, if you put all those names, right? Trey Myers, 6'4", 225, runs a 6'5". You throw him in Southern California, you put him in Dallas, all of a sudden, oh, everybody's going nuts. Whereas like the Chicagoland and the Midwest scouts just do such a great job. Like, hey, we know what this looks like, which is another thing. Like knowing your area, knowing what a guy looks like at the right time. Right, even going to the underclass. Hey, this kid is a freshman, sophomore. Maybe he's not quite as polished as somebody down in Houston or Alabama, Mississippi, wherever that may be. But like I know where he will be in 2 years. We know what the progression is.
That's probably been, and that's something that for me has come with time, right?
Hmm.
The longer you do this, the more or the easier it becomes to see that. I saw Jared Cushing as a freshman and then where he ends up,
Yep.
Joliet Catholic shortstop, now Xavier. Um, and to me, we talk about the shooter, but it's the movement patterns, right? Like it's the athleticism and the movement patterns and what is that current frame? How much how much projection is still in that frame? How does the body move and how athletic is that prospect? Because the more I watch, the guys that are fluid, easy movers, the guys that are athletic, they get better. It's pretty simple. Like they just continue to trend up. And those guys that aren't as athletic are maybe, just stronger at that current moment, but they're stiffer. They don't have the approach. They don't have the easy movements. They tend to not take those big jumps later on in their career. Is really the biggest thing that I've seen now 10 years into doing this.
Without a doubt, it's and like you talk about those easy movers. I'm always looking for which event. You guys have a few of the preseason events. Maybe it's a preseason all state, and I will harp for forever, especially for like a 2027 right now, where college coaches can't talk to you. That preseason event is so important. I can't like stress how important it is because they are following every year. I know that Illinois All-State event is going to have at least 5 arms that I am circling like potentially as a must-see this spring. And that's just me doing what I do, right? My scouting. I'm not handing out any scholarships, but like the schools are like, oh, we need to get to Chicago on our off day, Monday, to see this sophomore. We need to get in on this guy. I love watching it because the way those guys move, get down the mound, and you're there. And it seems like there's 50 of them who are all, touching their velo marks, but even more so those advanced analytics. But they move really well. It's a loose arm. What you guys do so well is you dive into the background. Hey, he plays hoops. He's in the middle of basketball season. He's dropping 20 a night. His dad played baseball at Illinois State, wherever it may be. There's all that backstory to it. But like those events, especially as a sophomore, to see the athleticism of those players, to highlight them as follows throughout the spring, to then bring that to must-see guys this summer, which then goes to August 1, have to make a call because ultimately those guys are looking to make offers earlier than other guys. And to make those offers, they need to make sure the risk is low. To mitigate that risk, they want to get multiple looks. So having those lists is huge from there. But you talked about like quality movers. I always think that like Xander Muth was such a
I was
quality
going to call him
mover.
out, shooter. You started talking about our preseason all state events and watching these movers and guys, I don't know if there's one guy that did more for his value coming to a preseason All-State than Xander Muth, putting himself on the board. I'm sorry to cut you off, but that is crazy that you were thinking the same guy that I was, because he
And
put on one of the best shows we've seen.
and I don't even know what bullpen that is, but it's got like the rubber mount. Like every time I look at it, I used to love like off-season bullpens on those mounts because everything was consistent, right? There was no like divot, hole, and I always felt like I could throw really well. But like I each year I look for I know what the mounds look like at each of your events. So like I know where they're at this one. Okay, this guy's throwing here. Jack Bauer's at this event. What a facility! I don't even know the
No, yeah,
facility.
that is at the max, and it's
Okay.
fairly new. They have an upstairs above the cage that they've
Oh, the
created into
bullpen.
this
Okay.
this pitching academy. They have weights up there. It's extremely nice up there. Actually, for this year's All-State and last year's All-State, we'll do our hitting up there. It's just a massive cage, and they
Oh
have
wow.
mounds inside the cage. But you can hit in there. So we'll hit in there, and then we'll do defense down on the field, and we'll actually have multiple mounds going on the other field, just to be more efficient, allow more guys to come to this event. So it's March 1st, shooter. We run the underclass in the morning and the upper class in the afternoon, and we're running
Wait,
we're
what date
running
was
through a
that?
lot of guys that day. March 1st, it's a Saturday because these guys in Illinois have high school tryouts on the 3rd, a
Hmm.
Monday.
I'm in
Um,
Dallas that week. Maybe I'll fly up. Now you got me thinking. Now you're like, is
well, if you miss it, we'll cover it as best we can with social. We'll let you know all the guys. There's hopefully going to be a ton of them to touch on. So
it?
either way, don't put that kind of pressure on yourself.
Well, I hate, I have FOMO, so I hate missing. I'm like looking at the list, like the 27th, right? We've had our rankings go out. You guys did a great job this past summer of the Super Soft games. But like this Winnick kid, Brady Winnick, like he's like that next loose mover early on who's the arm really works, right? Illinois kid, really easy to bet on. You guys did lose. Sushi Wilson's down at IMG now, which
Yeah.
I saw. Speaking of swings, I saw a swing from him recently. I'm going to see them, I think, in a few weeks, right after the Super 60. But like, I think he's got a real shot to hit. Who was the kid that won the first round? Cam, who moved to Georgia, then he
Cam
went to
Collier,
Cam Collier.
son of Lou Collier. They were mainstays in Chicago for a long time.
Uh,
Lou Collier was one of the best guys out there. Always treated me extremely well. Former big leaguer. And now I feel like he works with all of the talented guys down in Georgia.
Okay, like Cam's got like Sushi's got a shot to like have a similar path to Cam. But like this Wisniewski kid, Caden Wisniewski, like the conversations we've had on some of these guys, like I think it's one of the might be the most important thing that we do, right? Having more than just like, hey, he throws 90, he runs a 6.6, right? Like the most basic top layer information, but to go beyond like, yo, this guy's a baller. He like refuses to lose. He wins. He competes. You can throw him on the mound. He's going to go out there. He did it as a freshman. Like that story is so important for college coaches, right? Like that's what they want to hear when they call up Drew Locascio, when they call up Gavin Smith. Hey, who do I need to see? Hey, this Wisniewski kid played as a freshman at this school. Like that's the information that I'm looking for. Like, who is the guy who expects success? Who's the guy that hops on the field and yeah, maybe his tool levels are like a little bit below the other guy, but head to head, that guy will never lose. Like that's the information as especially as a college coach that I want to know. This guy will run on the field. He'll go catch bullpens for you. He'll go do this and that. Like that's why I think you guys are so valuable. You have that information. It's the network. Yes, we have all the TrackMan data, the blast data, the VaultMat, all that stuff. But when you combine that with the in-person knowledge of the player, that is premium stuff. That is gold for a family, a parent to have you guys in their corner to like know behind the scenes a little more value, a little bit more about the player. That's what college coaches are looking for, and ultimately for the high level guys, that's what pro guys are looking for. What's the makeup on this kid?
I mean, I think you bring up another great point because we're sitting at the convention this past weekend and we're for the first time trying to do some podcasts with some coaches and we're talking about Caden Wozniacki. We're talking about these guys and we see what we see on the field and it tends to kind of play out. Those guys that seem to be coachable on the field, seem to be great kids, seem to be, ultra locked in on the mound, love the, big moment. Like they tend to translate then off the field. what Coach Rockweiler was saying at McHenry about Caden Wozniewski, but he also has Brandon Shannon. Like, they live in the weight room. You know, they're leaders by what they're doing off the field. They're at every workout. I guess they had an open gym and Caden couldn't make it. And he's like in the coach's office the next morning, like, hey, coach, you know, I had a family thing. I would have never missed it. You know, like just things that tell you what kind of person this guy is. You know, how are they, how are they, how do they tick? And it's so, and credit to these high school coaches, because I think that's somewhat of a lost art in today's day and age. Is a lot of the college coaches will go straight to the summer coaches, and we get a ton of our information from these high school coaches. Hey, we've got this young freshman coming up. You need to see him. And that is so valuable for us as well, Shooter, is we're getting as much information from as many different resources as we can and trying to paint these pictures on these athletes with sometimes we'll get 2 looks on a guy. Sometimes we'll have 100 looks on a guy. The looks vary so much. So the network that you're talking about becomes that much more important.
And I mean, Coach Funkhauser at Edwardsville is talking to at ABCA. Like, the other thing, those guys see so much, right? They're at the game coaching every day, so they know the player. Yes, there will be some biases, like this kid did this, like, oh, I don't like that guy because, you know, he pimped a home run, right? Like, there may be some of that. I get that from coaches around the country, but a lot of those guys, like, hey, you've seen it. You were here. You saw Ryan Sloan last year. How does this guy? Oh, this guy's better, or whatever it may be. You can kind of lean on that, especially with the high school guys who have seen how many guys in their conference. Like, this is the best player we've had at Joliet Catholic in 25 years. Like, they'll know that better than you. So just to
Yes.
listen, not take it everything for certainty, but like that's information that is super valuable. And I do it a ton in Texas, Georgia, Florida, California. I'll go to New Jersey. Like, what do you got here? Who's good? And it happens in a hurry. Those coaches will see it. They're no fools.
Absolutely. And Shooter, I know we've talked a lot here about players in Illinois, and there's more guys to touch on when you go in the 28 class and some of the guys we have there. But the 27 class looks extremely strong, and our super sophomore team from last year really
Yeah.
makes up a lot of the high ranked guys there. And if there's anybody else you want to touch on, feel free. But Gavin, Tyler, Peter, you know, we shot something out on social about, hey, we have Shooter Hunt on the podcast today. Like, this is a big moment, Shooter. Whether you want to admit it or not, we love having you on. I can't tell you how much, and I enjoy just our conversations off of these podcasts when you're
Hmm.
calling me on, guys. But there were some questions getting thrown around. I want to kind of open up the floor. While we have you, some things that
Uh-oh.
maybe some parents would be curious about, things we're curious about. So, Gavin, lead the way
Yeah.
here.
Oh,
Shooter,
geez.
I think we each have some questions for you, but the first question that I have is, in your time with the company, who would you say is the maybe best or your favorite prospect that you have seen come through Illinois?
Through Illinois. Oh, man.
Or
See,
just the country as a whole, too?
there's so much recency bias. Like, I loved Ryan Sloan, and a lot of it had to do with like his makeup. I just think there was some talk like his fastball metrics. Everybody was talking about metrics this versus some other guys in the class, and a huge reason for why we kept him as a number one right-hander was, hey, this guy's gonna do it. And when it comes to nut cutting time, like, that's the guy you want on the mound. He's going to be able to do some things that are different than these other guys who, oh no, his analytics here, this. Okay, cool. Well, when it comes down to it, Ryan Sloan's going to have the ball. So like, definitely him. Alec Thomas was one of the first guys. I know that would be a super popular one, but Quinn Priester, the 2019 class was like the first class I had start to finish. And Quinn Priester was one of the first arms. We talk about those early events where it's like, hey, this guy moves different. And Drew can tell stories about the amount of box scores. Like, I would text him like, hey, it's Quinn Priester day, like his sophomore year. Like, hey, what's going on? Is it raining? Like, I would ask, like, why aren't they playing right now? Looking at Game Changer or whatever it was. Quinn Priester is definitely one of those guys from an early age, like that 2019 crew that we followed start to finish. So I would probably go with Quinn Priester.
So then I think this is a question that I had, but it's kind of similar to one of the guest questions that we had. And that is, what are some things that you wish parents and players understood about the recruiting process?
I think it's one of the things I tell each place I go. Like, in a great world that like baseball players, blue collar, you're gonna let your actions speak for themselves, not going to self-promote for the most part, right? You just want to go out there. If I'm good enough, they'll find me. It's really difficult for college coaches to find you. It's a finite amount of time. Recruiting budgets have been slashed. There's not as many guys on the road. You do have to do some self-promotion. You're getting your resume out there, and it's not really, hey, I'm not peacocking, self-promoting myself. No, you're doing your due diligence the same way you would apply to a college. If you were just a student, you would write some applications. You would not just hope that, hey, I hope Princeton finds me. No, you would have to send something in there. So have stuff ready, understand how to send out your schedule, know when you're pitching, make things easy for them. The easier it can be, you'd be surprised. The tournaments that I go to, the events, who do I need to watch here? Hey, they're dealing with the transfer portal, this, that. What do I need to do? They kind of roll in, put a video in the email the entire coaching staff, do it individually, stay up on it, post stuff on social media, because that's essentially become your LinkedIn, right? Twitter is your LinkedIn. Like, utilize it where coaches can see it. They want to set reminders. They not only are they recruiting, they're also coaching. They have to go speak at events. There's so much that they have going on. The easier you can make it for them, the better. And then the other thing I want to say, like, getting a true evaluation of yourself and being open to it it can be humbling, right? It's not easy to hear, like, hey, you're not an SEC player. Like, okay, go prove them wrong, but for the time being, I need to set my sights here. And especially in this day and age of recruiting, I think not that you're lowering your sights, it's going to go down to a 34-man roster at the Division I level. It's going to be really difficult to kind of make those get to those high-end conferences. Go play. Getting playing time is paramount. Like, be on the field. Where can I play right away? Where's the culture at that I want to be in? Who's the coaching staff I like to be around? What's the school that I want to end up at? There's so many great programs out there, not just Division I. Like, some of my best friends were Division III players, and I love Division III baseball. Like, they left having a great time, the best friends in their life. They've got a great network. All have great jobs now with great stories, right? Like, there are great D2 programs, the JUCO programs by you guys. There are so many other places. Now, that's a long-winded answer but it is difficult to be recruited right now. And get out there. Obviously, our profile is a great place to start. And a lot of the things we talk about is like having that resume. Ultimately, the job interview is going to be when you go out and play, right? They're going to come watch you. But to get on their radar, having that profile to send out, having the social media stuff to send out, and honestly having the four of you in their corner to talk about them when a coach calls, that's really important.
And then this is kind of a personal question for me to get some advice from you, I guess. When you're out evaluating a hitter, what are some key traits that you look for to determine if a prospect will hit at the collegiate level?
Well, I think decision making and swing decisions are like the hardest thing to grade. Like, especially at the high school level, where college now you have all these analytics that you're looking, batted ball, whatever it may be, swing and miss. High school is a little more difficult. So there's like little nuances. And even in BP, to guys listening, like, a bad pitch in batting practice that you can adjust to is more important to me than like 5 grooved fastballs, single plane, one spot, nonstop that you're whacking. And there's certain types where, like, can this kid adjust? Or is it, I call it a groove swing. Like, hey, it's one pitch, one spot. Yes, you can run into it here and hit it a mile. But what happens, and Jaden Fauske is a perfect example of a guy that I love that can do this, right? It doesn't have to be in the same spot. He can adjust to multiple different speeds. He's comfortable hitting in all counts. Those are things to look for, right? Hey, the guy, oh man, he had 3 hits today. Were they all first pitch fastball? Okay, well, we need to keep looking at that. What has he done is he comfortable in the box when he's down in the count? Is he unafraid to hit with 2 strikes? What does he do to adjust in those? What is his preparation going into the box? But even from BP, like, that is something to look for. And I always look when guys are throwing, like, oh, boom, groove, 3 in a row right down the middle. Then guy yanks one and the kid still hits it the other way and is able to handle the barrel, manipulate it a little bit. Hey, that sparks something immediately. That'll get a note from me in a hurry.
Shooter, this is kind of off topic from recruiting, but more about your background with prep baseball. So when, I guess, did you start with prep baseball? What were you doing before, and how did you get into the company?
So I had played professionally, drafted out of Tulane, played professionally, was done there, finished up my degree, and I was coaching at Tulane for a couple years. Moved on from there, and almost, it was fate, right? TJ, my brother, who does New Jersey for us, I was working with him, helping some events. One of the hottest events I've ever been to that Sean Duncan happened to be at. So I was sitting next to Dunk for the full event. It was like 3 or 4 days, 105 degrees. I think it was TJ's first event, right? There's 150 kids there. You guys can imagine that Dunk's there, 150 kids, your first event. So I was talking to Dunk the whole time about prospects. I go to the future games from there to help out. At the time was like Team PA, New York, New Jersey. It was like those three states were all on the same team, kind of just getting started. And left there. I was moving out to Oregon with my wife, and Sean called, was like, "Hey, I have this role. We're getting bigger. Would you be interested in doing this?" And I was like, "Heck yeah, I want to stay in baseball." You guys know, like the fraternity of being in baseball at the field, talking to the guys. I have the best job in the world. I get to go watch baseball, talk about it. It's never a bad day at the ballpark. So it's incredible. So that's kind of how it came. Honestly, the more games you're at, the more things you see, the better you're going to be. And it just so happened I was at the right games at the right time, and here I am.
Well, Shooter, I'll hop in here. This kind of builds a little bit off what you were talking about. Maybe so when you evaluate hitters, but you touched on earlier. You will go back and look at some of the showcase data and some of the showcase metrics. We had Coach Copeland from NIU on, and he was saying like, hey, one metric that I fancy is vertical approach angle. When you are evaluating whether it be a hitter or a pitcher, this is more of a personal preference question, but do you have a certain metric that, you really look at that might stand out in your mind opposed to others?
I think there's so many thresholds. So there's like, right, and again, it's like a grouping. So like for pitchers, or I would say for position players, the most basic: how hard you hit the ball, how quickly can you accelerate, right? So finding the best athletes who can hit the ball hard. So for like the most basic, your exit velocity and your 60 time, like from the very basic level. Now those can be really misleading. I always think of like Anthony Volpe, who can steal 50 bags with the Yankees, first rounder. Like his 60 time was not like crazy high, but he had really good ground force. His first step and instincts were really important there. So like his baseline, okay, like this guy's not slow. I know that. Where do I go from there? Along the same lines, like there's certain thresholds with the blast metrics. Like, hey, what's going on here? Now, I want things to quantify my eyes, right? Like we all want to just be able to see it and say like, this guy's good. Doesn't always work out, which is why when I have an initial impression, I'm writing it down, but I'll go back and check. There's a kid, Max Anderson, who was like a second rounder out of Nebraska. Came to the Super 60. I didn't like his swing. Like it just wasn't for me. But coming out of the Super 60, his blast motion stuff was incredibly hot. Like he had great metrics across the boards. I'm not going to ignore that. Like now I want to follow him. Oh, wow, he has great swing decisions. That helped out. But I think from the hitting standpoint, there's certain thresholds like the bat speed, the hand speed, that are important. Like how hard you hit the ball, how quickly do you accelerate? Almost every coach is going to do that, right? I want a guy who's like 6'7" and below and 100-mile-an-hour exit velocity. Like you kind of start from there and then you move on. Now it's not the end all be all, right? Kids are going to get stronger. Your exit velocities will go up. Like that's something that I'm not like too concerned about, but like that's a starting point when I'm looking at the preseason All-State, right? Hey, who are the guys that were here? Now, pitching wise, like vertical approach would be awesome to look at that stuff. Trying to think like velocity wise, like each year, like the threshold of a high end guy. Like I know a freshman in high school will be mostly around here. Now those guys will fluctuate, right? There's like tons of guys who are great movers at 77 to 79. Like, hey, I'm going to circle this. Like, honestly, I was a late bloomer. So like I have a soft spot for like this guy moves well. Maybe he's a shortstop pitcher. I don't really care what his velocity is. The arm's moving quick. He can manipulate spin, especially for an arm at a young age. If he's throwing a firm breaking ball, like the velocity's going to jump. Like I'm not too concerned about fastball. We can build that. There's probably over 100 facilities in your state right now that are promising to build velocity. Like puberty is the best velocity builder of anything. But can he manipulate spin? What is his spin metrics? More so like on the breaking ball. Like, does this kid know what he's doing with the breaking ball? Because having touch on a pitch is really difficult, at least for me, to build. Like, hey, this guy can spin a really good curveball and can go to a slider. Like, that is unheard of. Like, and to any sophomore, freshman, junior out there, like, you don't need to be doing that, but it's just saying if you do that at a high level at a young age, it's probably a pretty good sign that guy's a dude. Movement patterns are king, though. Like, how do you move? Is it fluid? Is it continuous? Is it not choppy?
Well, no, I mean, it's something we try to preach on this podcast too. Like, I feel like we're always talking about movement patterns for sure. And just hearing you talk, I'll never forget, just, personally, me and Gavin 3 years ago came on as interns, and every summer there's a scouting roundtable with you and various other state directors. And you said the line, and I was hoping you'd say the line, but like the biggest indicator for velocity is just puberty, right? And it's something we try to preach a little bit on this podcast, whether it's here or at our events. Like, everybody gets so caught up in velo with pitchers anymore, and it's like, hey man, like you're 14 or 15, like it'll come, right? Just eat, get in the weight room, that type of stuff. So it probably ring some bells for me and Gavin there.
With that, especially for a pitcher, like, and it can get lost. Like, hey, you're chasing velocity more so. Hey, game management. I always compare it, like, I'm a basketball guy, so like compare it to like, isn't Anthony Davis? No, is he a Chicago guy? So like,
Yeah.
Anthony Davis was like a guard, and then all of a sudden he became a 7-footer, right? So like he could do all these things. Hey, I was throwing 78, 79, so I had to figure out how to survive. Right? It was a survival. Like, I had to mix speed, so whatever it may be. Now the velocity comes. Hey, now it's like you have a superpower. So I love watching those guys go from like, hey, they had to be a little crafty. They had to understand how to pitch. And then they get a jolt of velocity, whatever that may be. And now it's like you see in their face go like, oh, now you just can't leave. Like now it's on, like nobody's going to be able to get a hit off me. And again, that expectation of success, like that's so important to me. Like, this guy believes he's the dude.
Yeah, no, we actually had talked about that on a podcast where like guys that can get outs without throwing hard are scary. Cause like when that pops, like then you're really cooking with something. But no, my first question for you, your skill evaluating, obviously you're really talented. Your eyes are great. How much of that came from just playing at a high level and just your, being just a baseball mind?
I would say more so, like, I grew up in a family of coaches. So my dad was a coach, just being around the game. Like, I played so many games. I went to so many games. I just sat there and watched. And even from my time coming on here, I look back to like, oh, what in the world was I evaluating here? Like, that was such a poor eval back then, because we're always developing our eye, and the more you see, the better you are. That's why when you guys came on, I was probably like, get to as many games as you can. Don't leave. Just be at them. It's a huge, like, you never know who's going to come in late. You never know what you're going to see. But one thing you know for certain is if you're not there, you won't see it. So like that's always important. I don't even think it was so much the high level. I think a lot of guys who come back from the pro side of things or like a super high level, you have to like regulate. Like, a 15-year-old does not look the same as a guy in AA, right? Like, hey, this guy stinks. No, he's just 15. Like, he's just not strong enough yet. So it is something where I don't think you need to have played at a high level. Or even, shoot, if you look at a lot of the front offices and even some scouting departments, you may not even have had to have played at all. You just have to have a willingness to work hard, to watch the game, and be open to learn it.
So I was a pitcher, shooter. So one of the things that I struggled with for a while was like evaluating a hitter, right? Like, I know what a good hitter looks like, but like why? How much do you actually look at mechanics and like comparing it? I mean, in-game success, that, speaks for itself, but like actually breaking down a swing, how important is that to you?
I think all of us probably have our certain sweet spots. Like, we like this kind of swing, like certain athletic looseness of the wrist. I call it like flick, like, so the ability to like change planes, really be handsy with it. So like that manipulation, that's the importance. Like, I'm always learning though, right? Like we're in like a golden age of player development. So constant learning, especially through Twitter, like hitting Twitter, like some stuff I like, some stuff I don't, but constantly evaluating it, which is awesome. I would highly suggest that everybody does the same who's in the scouting age because, right, hitting and pitching, there's constant adjustments being made, right? Like those high spin up top, hitters are adjusting to that now, and I always think things will come full circle. You'll start seeing more of like the sinker, like better pitch profiles from that standpoint. But hitting wise, like, do you get in a good position? Like everybody may start different. Like where do you get to? And then ultimate, a lot of what I go to, especially with the high end guys, is would this guy hit me? Like there are certain guys where it's like this guy would never hit me. He would never make contact, and like if you don't think you're the best, then you shouldn't be on the field. So I'm sure like the pitchers out there, like you should be thinking that at all times. But there are certain guys where it's like there are holes in here that this guy cannot fix. He would not make contact. Versus there are some dudes where like, hey, this would be a really tough out. This guy would have a really good shot. And to me, that triggers like, we should follow this guy. This would be good. I'd have trouble getting this guy out.
And Shooter, to your point, I was a position player. And as a hitter, I look at pitchers that way. Would I want to hit this guy? Or is there all kinds of funk coming at you? Is he hiding it? Is it across his body? Is he doing something with the breaking ball? Whatever it may be. Is it a really good, left-handed changeup? Because I had no chance on that. Whatever it may be. But I definitely look at it like that as well.
I honestly, there's a lot of times because as a pitcher, I think evaluating hitters is a little bit easier, right? Like each time that's all I was thinking, like hitter, versus like, oh, the pitcher, to your point, Drew, like, oh, this guy moves so easy. Everything's coming out. And then like, I've talked to other hitters, like really talented hitters are like, yeah, he moves so easy and it's ultra easy to time up. Like you can keep that silky 92 and I'm going to depart it in the left field stance. Like that's, versus I love Tanner Houck. Tanner Houck was like one of my favorite, and I didn't even know he was a Super 60 guy until later on. But like
he was a Sean Duncan favorite as well. Yeah,
dude, his freshman year at Missouri, I remember watching him on the SEC, whatever it was, but being like, oh my God, how is this guy ever going to give up a hit? And like, Columbia, it's probably like 50 degrees sleeting, and those poor guys just getting bared in on like 94 on the hands. Not to mention he was a mean SOB, still like goes out there and like he is tough as nails, but like it's an uncomfortable at bat. How are guys taking in the box? Or do they have no chance? Now it's not just like 0-2 expanded, like weak swing. Flat out, he's telling them what's coming, and they have no shot. That's a pretty good indicator. This guy's pretty good. Like that's an FU fastball. That is like slider midnight anytime I want, down the middle. You have no chance.
No, this is my last question, Shooter. Being a fellow Commodore, what was your favorite place to eat in Falmouth?
Oh my God! And shout out Jeff Trundy. I've goosebumps, like thinking about Jeff Trundy. If any of you have seen Summer Catch, like he literally was Brian Dennehy, like the kindest, sweetest man. Rest in peace. Passed away. Legend in the Cape Cod League. I hope they name the field after him. Like the man changed my life, so I can't say enough. I would I love the 99 up in New England. Like, and this is like college days me. Like they had this appetizer that was like half boneless wings, half potato skins. And you think about college athletes now, like what you guys are like, what college athletes, high level college athletes, what they're eating. Dude, I was eating Papagenos and I was eating boneless wings and potato skins. So like, shout out all the athletes who are pitchers. What about you? What were you eating up there?
We did the Boathouse a lot.
Oh, okay. Nothing wrong with that. I'm behind that.
Shooter, and then I think we've got just one question here from our guests that has not been answered yet, and that would be, what are recruiting misconceptions that players should know?
I think some of the metrics, like where you assume, like, again, everything comes back to movement patterns. Even like, hey, this guy's got a strong arm. It doesn't mean like, hey, he's 92 across the diamond versus 90. Like, that really doesn't matter. Like, that's not a real separation. I always think it's good to show off your arm. Like when we go to the pro cases, hey, show it off early, let them know that you have it. But from there, the glove to hand is essential. Like you crow hopping across the diamond is not going to pique the interest of these pro guys. Guess what? They do not care. How quickly do you get glove to hand? Even to the 60 point, which is such a huge reason why we brought in the vault, right? We had the mats, the quick, the split speeds, beyond just the 60, like that athleticism, that ground force. I always go back to Anthony Volpe because he was a teaching point for me. Like Jersey kid I was locked in on, like all these things like, oh, he's not super quick, right? Back then, like, hey, he's like a 6'9", 7'0" runner, but man, that first step, like it's different. He got to everything. The ball found the right spot in the mid at all times. So like there's so much more than just the metrics that go beyond what you are as a player, right? That'll get you in the door. There's a certain threshold. The data essentially will build your floor, but how likely you are to get there is kind of going to dictate your ceiling. So that's something that you have to be conscious of. And I think the other thing, like with regards to your rankings, like it's good to be on a list. Like college coaches, everybody loves lists. So like just getting on those lists, coming out at an event, even an event a coach is not at, they are following it so closely, right? It's their job to be building this. Hey, I can't be everywhere, but we have a database. They're looking at this data. So like even when somebody is not there, they are there. They are going to, if there's no coach there, Gavin Smith's going to get a call afterwards. If there's no coach there, Drew Locascio is getting a call afterwards. So even when you think nobody's watching, somebody is watching.
And I don't know if anybody else has anything before we let Shooter go, but one thing, Shooter, I wanted to do for you is to pub maybe like a recruiting essentials or coffee and curveballs that maybe you have coming out for that maybe our listeners don't know that you do that every week.
Yeah, so I've really dived in. I always get that wrong, but to the recruiting essentials level of things, but even beyond just the D1. We've had on some SEC recruiting coordinators, but at ABCA we had a D3 school, Randolph-Macon down in Virginia. Coach Hedrick was incredible. Like most kids will not play Division I baseball. That is not the end all be all. So if you have any questions, coaches to be interviewed, I am fascinated by the fact of, hey, the 1%ers who are going to LSU or Texas or wherever it may be, what about the rest of those? How do you get recruited? What do I have to do? So we are constantly trying to help out everybody in baseball because in the end, like I love baseball. I want the sport to continue to grow, whether it's at the highest of high levels, Omaha, or hey, headed to Cedar Rapids for the D3 championship. Like we are promoting the game. We are trying our best from that standpoint. But getting back to it, at Shooter Hunt on X, Twitter, I try to retweet as much as I can, promoting the game. But other than that, I mean, Skylar Mead, I think, is the next one that I have coming up next week. I know you guys already had him, but he's one of my favorites. So we have some good stuff coming up.
Well, Shooter, I think I speak for all of us. We were extremely pumped when you said you were willing to come on here, and it's always a great conversation. I always walk away learning something or thinking about something a different way after talking to you. And I love it because you have been around the game for a long time. You see all the top players in the country, and that is just so vital for us to learn from you and continue to bounce things off of you. And I don't envy having to put those national rankings together. That cannot be easy. It's hard enough doing a state ranking. So from all of us here at the Bullpen podcast, thank you for taking the time. I know this was a long one today, but hopefully the viewers enjoy it.
Thanks for having me. Am I a recurring guest? Can I come on and ask you guys about spring stuff later on?
I was actually thinking about it as we were talking. Like, it would be awesome to have you on either after the winter season is over. Talk about some of the standouts, guys that may be factoring in nationally that we're going to have to go follow for future games, whatever it may be. But then, as we get into the spring, maybe some of these draft guys that are doing stuff, whatever you want. I mean, it's an open invitation for Shooter Hunt.
Wow. Well, we'll just do our usual conversations after the event or even mid-event where I'm like texting you, who is this guy? And you're like, shut up, Shooter. I'm
running an event here.
Kids here. We'll do it live on the Bullpen.
Oh, I love it. Well, thank you. Appreciate you, Shooter.
Guys.
Yep.
Yeah.